Welcome to round 2 of the selfie lightweight mirrorless face-off. In this corner, we have the Panasonic Lumix GF7, and in this corner, it's the Nikon J5. Round 1 ended in a draw when we compared the specs and features and found the Nikon to be the better small camera, while the Lumix was clearly the best at being a selfie camera. The Nikon is the obvious choice for more serious photographers and those who need to capture fast action. But if you care anything about selfies and remote shooting, then the Lumix is your choice. If you still can't decide, then here's round 2, where we're going to look a little deeper by comparing the output of each camera to judge the quality produced by the sensor and lens combinations. It's interesting that these two compact camera systems use opposing strategies to arrive at what should be similar picture quality. Which strategy will prove superior? On the left we see a representation of the Lumix 4/3 sensor. It's the same 16 megapixel sensor Panasonic is using on the GX7, the GM1, and the GM5. So if you are considering any of those, this test should be of interest to you too. On the right is Nikon's all-new 21 megapixel sensor, only seen on the J5 so far. The much smaller Nikon sensor has 31% more pixels, packed amazingly tight, more than double the density of the Lumix sensor. The roomy Lumix has a sensor area that is 94% greater than the Nikon's. However, due to the Nikon's wider rectangle, the difference in diagonal measurement between the two is only 31%. The more panoramic Nikon with its 3:2 aspect ratio is more pleasing to the eye and better for video than the nearly square Lumix, but it means some good glass is wasted, as a strange cropping shade on the front of the Nikon's kit lens demonstrates. The Nikon lens elements are so tiny already that they are barely shards of glass. This can't be good for image quality. So, Panasonic is betting that a larger sensor with fewer pixels will produce a higher quality image because more light is falling on each pixel, while Nikon has embraced more advanced miniaturization and the use of higher technology to compensate for the physical limitations of its more tiny world. Can Nikon really pull this off? Let's compare the files these sensors output and find out. Here is a relative size comparison of raw image files from both cameras shot at the same time. The huge difference between the sensors is starting to fade away already. The Nikon image on the right is only a tiny bit taller than the Lumix, 3,724 pixels versus 3,464. To make these images for comparison, we made this camera rig. Both cameras were set on manual and special features turned off, but most of the settings don't have any effect on the raw image files we are capturing here. We set the zoom on each lens to a medium length so that the subject, a medicine bottle sitting on the swing, would appear at about the same size in both image files when viewed side by side at 100% on the monitor. Using the timer to eliminate any vibrations, we made our exposures. Here are the shots downloaded to the computer. In this case, the 16 megapixel Lumix produced a 19 megabyte file, while the 21 megapixel Nikon output a 23 megabyte file. Don't be thinking this NEF file is the same as previous NEF files, because these cameras are so new the codecs needed to view the raw files are not yet widely available. The only thing I could find to allow me to see the full-sized raw images from both of the cameras was an application called Fast Raw Viewer, and I'll put a link to it in the top right corner of this video window and in the description below. I set both cameras to f8 at 200th of a second, but the GF7 ended up with way overexposed highlights, so I had to take away 2/3 of a stop by changing its shutter speed to 320. I think this is because each bigger Lumix pixel is gathering more light than the Nikon's. Do you think you'll be able to read the black lettering on the glossy white label with either camera? Let's take a closer look. No, unfortunately not, and there are some other problems. How about a side-by-side comparison? Starting from the bottle top, the Panasonic looks better defined. And the Nikon has obvious color fringing in the highlights here, and even more on the spectral highlight on the mouth of the bottle. But as we move to the label, the Nikon actually looks closer to being readable. Both cameras are showing a moire pattern in the letters, but it's less pronounced on the J5 image. Look at these columns, they are much better defined on the Nikon, even though the color on the Nikon is less controlled than it is on the GF7. Here's another way to compare. As we flip back and forth, try to decide which one has better resolution, contrast, and better color. I think the GF7 has created a more pleasing image, but the Nikon seems to have held on to more detail. Next, let's take a look at the shadows. Fast Raw Viewer highlights the underexposed areas in pink with areas of total lost detail in white. See all the white in the Lumix image? If you just look at this highlighting, then it appears the Nikon has done a much better job capturing shadow detail. Is this because the GF7 is slightly underexposed at 320th of a second compared to the J5's 200th of a second? But if the GF7 was shot at 200th, the subject in the highlight would have lost even more detail. Just look at what happened when we shot the Lumix at 250th of a second. The pink is indicating overexposure and lost detail. Let's zoom into that same shadowy area and look at things a different way. The dark shadows may be hard to see on your monitor, so I'm going to do some extreme toning to bring out the lighter areas within the shadow to help show where the detail is truly lost. Flipping between the Lumix and Nikon, you can see we have a similar situation as we did it with the highlights. The Nikon seems to have captured more detail, but it's a yucky kind of a detail. The color and tone of the Lumix looks more natural, while the Nikon has a lot of unpleasant color and strange artifacts. For good measure, let's explore a little more of the image. How about this middle darkish area by the foot of the swing? In this area, it's a similar story, but the GF7 looks sharper, not to mention more natural in color and tone. The darkest areas do appear to have more detail in the J5, however. So, at the end of round 2, there is yet no knockout punch by either contender. Each has its strengths and weaknesses. The Nikon seems to have suffered a lot from its tiny lens, as indicated by the color fringing we saw in the spectral highlights. With a better lens, it's possible the J5 could clean up its image across the tonal range. This is really disappointing coming from such a well-established camera company. Nikon had a chance to shine here in round 2, but they threw the fight to the new kid, Panasonic. It's clear from these results that resolution isn't everything, and I have to say the GF7 made a prettier picture. But it's not over yet. Round 3 is coming up. Let us know what you want to see in the comments below. Tell us what's more important to you, video features and quality, low light capability, or something else. Stay tuned.